Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Commander Legends Battle for Baldur Gate spoilers. And we've reached week number 2 of spoiler season, and we've moved past all the background stuff. We're into the week of normal cards, non-legendary cards, even though there's some legends mixed in here as well. But we got some exciting stuff. We got some spicy mythics, a bunch of dragons, just some really neat cards, which means we should probably jump right into it. Start talking sweet new Commander Legends Battle for Baldur Gate cards. Before we do, 2 quick reminders. Actually 3 maybe, I don't know. Number 1, if you need some Commander Legends Battle for Baldur Gate cards, you can get them from our amazing sponsor Card Kingdom over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish. Number 2, to keep up on all the latest spoilers throughout the day, head on over to MTGpreviews.com. And number 3, if you want even more Commander content, make sure to check out the MTG Goldfish Commander YouTube. Anyway, let's break down today's dose of Commander Legends Battle for Baldur Gate spoilers. First up today, we got one of my favorite cards from the entire set, Legion Loyalty. 8 mana enchantment says, creatures you control have Myriad. So when you attack with a creature, you get a token copy for each other opponent that hits your opponent, maybe it triggers its ETB, and then goes away at the end of combat. So Legion Loyalty, is this card good? I don't really think it's that good. Is this card fun? Oh my god, yes. I cannot wait to play with this card. So I've seen some people say, oh, this is the white Crater Hoof. Is this 8 mana finisher? But I don't really think that's true. If you think about Crater Hoof, what Crater Hoof is great at is if you got a board, guaranteeing that you kill one person. And if you got a big board, maybe you kill everyone. The difference with Legion Loyalty is if you got a big board, it does help increase your odds of killing everyone because you're going to get copies of your creature for each opponent, but it doesn't actually make sure you kill that one person. You can't just take out the arch enemy because remember, you're just getting the Myriad copies for each other opponent. So if you send everything at one opponent, you're not actually getting any more damage on that opponent with Legion Loyalty. So I think this is way worse than Crater Hoof. On the other hand, I do think this is kind of fairly costed, as crazy as that sounds. I know 8 mana is a ton, and that's the biggest drawback of this card, but when you consider that giving a single creature Myriad costs 6 mana in Blade of Selves, when you consider equipping and casting, 6 mana with Duke Alder, 8 mana to give all your stuff Myriad every single turn, seems like a pretty fair price. So for me, this is like a weird attacking Ishin Panharmonicon style card. Play a bunch of ETBs, attack with your stuff, get a whole bunch of Muldrifters, refill your hand, deal a bunch of damage. It's going to be spectacular. Works really well in Ishin. So with Ishin, essentially you get Myriad twice. They do stack. Also, I forgot to mention that with something like Duke Alder or whatever, your creatures can have Myriad more than once, and then you're going to get multiple copies of them when they attack. But in Ishin, let's say you got Ishin, you're going to get double Legion Loyalty triggers. So you attack one opponent with one creature, and you're going to get 2 copies of that creature to hit the other 2 opponents. That is a ton of value just for attacking. The only downside is you're not going to get attack triggers of the things that you attack with. So let's say you got a Drakuseth, and you attack with Drakuseth, and you get a whole bunch of Drakuseths. Actually, I don't know if that works because it's legendary, but bear with me. It's to attack with Drakuseth, you get a whole bunch of Drakuseths. Those Drakuseths that come into play with Myriad are already going to be attacking, so you're not going to get their attack triggers, although, what do you really care? You get a huge board of dragons anyway. The other thing that's worth noting about this card is it's a little awkward with legends. We have a lot of powerful legends in Commander. Some decks I play in Commander, it seems like most of the creatures are legends, and if you Myriad a legend, you're just going to legend rule yourself. Sometimes that's okay if you got like AO or something, because you're going to trigger its death trigger a bunch of times. But let's say you want to make a bunch of Elish Norns with Legion Loyalty. You're going to need a mirror box or some other way to avoid the legend rule, or else you're just going to get a bunch of Elish Norns that are immediately going to die because it's legendary. The other downside of Legion Loyalty compared to something like Crater Hoof is it's a little harder to cheat an enchantment into play and find an enchantment than a creature, although we do have some pretty decent ways. Academy Rector Lost Dormancers can just get a Legion Loyalty directly on the battlefield. You can go Reanimation, like this could be a good option in Gen, which is good at reanimating enchantments, or just use Invoke Justice, Brilliant Restoration. If you can get this into play early in the game without spending the full 8 mana, then this can be a very busted card. Also, maybe an enchantment style deck. The only downside in Enchantress is, are you going to have enough creatures to trigger it? But if you do, it's going to be really strong because you can ramp into it really quickly with Sanctum Weaver, Sarah Sanctum. Enchantment deck's really good at making big mana. As far as actually being a competitive finisher, I think this card's pretty bad though. Like, if you just want to kill people, I think you're way better off casting in a Chroma's Will or something. But that doesn't mean Legion Loyalty is a bad card. We're playing Commander. Commander's about doing crazy things. It's about having fun. And Legion Loyalty is one of the best cards in all of Commander Legends for creating ridiculous board states, for drawing a ton of cards, for making a ton of creatures, for pulling off weird shenanigans. So I love this card. I don't think this card's good. I know there's going to be games where it's stuck in my hand and it never gets on the battlefield. There's going to be games where I get this down the turn after someone farewelled me and I got no board and it's 8 mana, do nothing until I rebuild. But when things go right, this card is going to do spectacular things. We also got a white adventure equipment in Horn of Valhalla, which I think is pretty good. So one side, the adventure side, double white and X sorcery, make X/1/1 white soldier creature tokens, and then its front side is an equipment. 2 to cast, 3 to equip, gives equip creature +1/+1 for each other creature you control. So this is essentially a sorcery speed, Secure the Ways, or Grand Crescendo, mixed with a very upgraded, thankfully, Pen and Blade. I've never seen anyone play Pen and Blade. It's pretty bad, but you get a discount both in casting and equipping it compared to Pen and Blade, so maybe Horn of Valhalla will be good enough. I think this card's actually pretty good. The token making side being sorcery speed is a pretty big drawback. You're much more likely to get Wrath. You can't end of turn it, untap, overrun, win, anything like that, but still, its rate is good. Grand Crescendo is a new staple, and that's going to make exactly the same amount of tokens. You're just doing it sorcery speed, and then the equipment side can be good in the right deck. One of the weirdest parts about this card is this is an equipment that isn't good, at least that good in most equipment decks. I think if you're playing a go wide equipment deck, something like Kemba Regent, they can make a ton of creatures, then this is probably pretty good, but I think this is an equipment for token decks, for Jetmir, Jennifer, Benny, for Reese. In those decks, the token making side is pretty good. They're already playing Secure the Ways. They're already playing Grand Crescendo. So this is kind of right on par with those, even if it is sorcery speed. And then the equipment side's actually going to be really scary. Imagine making a bunch of tokens, turning on Jetmir, putting Horn of Valhalla on it. You're definitely just one-shotting someone with this huge trampling, double-striking Jetmir, or you can just throw it on some random evasive creature. So Horn of Valhalla, a little bit weird that it's an equipment that's not great in Voltron-y equipment decks, but in a token deck, I think this card is really good and maybe even an auto include. We also got a cute little kitten that I'm not worried about being good enough. If anything, I'm worried this card's going to be too good. In Displacer Kitten, a 4-mana 2/2 cat beast with avoidance that says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, exile it to one target non-land permanent, not even creature, non-land permanent you control, and then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So this is way better than its parents. Displacer Beast pretty bad. Displacer Kitten kind of busted. I think this card is an easy staple in a bunch of different decks, plus has a ton of combo potential. So obvious home number one, any sort of blink deck. If you're trying to blink your stuff for value, this is an absurd way to do it. So Brago, Rune, Yarion, Afara, Orvar, not technically a blink deck, but this works really well there too. So you might be thinking, oh wait, but if I'm playing like Rune or Yarion or something, aren't I going to have mostly creatures? Am I going to have enough spells to trigger this? The answer is you're probably going to have enough spells because it triggers not on instants or sorceries, but any non-creature. So this means all your mana rocks are going to let you blink something. Your Conjurer's Closet, your Detention Sphere, your Venser, your actual blink spells like Ephemer are going to let you blink 2 things. So even if your deck is mostly creatures, because you're going to have some spells and you're going to have mana rocks and utility artifacts and enchantments, I think the Displacer Kitten's probably going to be good enough in those decks. The other sneaky place to play this, but playing it fairly at least, is in Spellslinger decks. In Spellslinger decks, you legit do have a problem that you might not have great creatures to blink, but this can just be protection for itself or for your commander. Let's say playing Hinata, and your opponent goes to Swords to Plowshares it. You can just cast an instant, blink your Hinata, fizzle the removal spell, and keep your commander on the battlefield. Doesn't work with Wraths, but it does work really well with targeted removal, and Displacer Kitten can blink itself, so it does have some protection built in. Your opponent goes to kill it, you cast a spell, you blink it, fizzle the removal. There are some okay blink creatures in Spellslinger decks, like a Dual Caster Mage, Archaeomancer, which has some combo potential. We'll come back around to that. But it's also worth mentioning that this blinks any non-creature permanent, not just creatures, which makes it way more powerful. This means you can be blinking your Sagas. You can blink Mirari's Conjecture and get back the spell you cast to blink it to do it again and do it again. You can keep resetting Mystic Remore. Mystic Remore is a busted card. The problem is it's hard to keep on the battlefield because of cumulative upkeep, but if you can keep blinking it with Displacer Kitten every turn, so you're not going to have to pay the upkeep, that is just a ridiculous source of card advantage. So hitting non-creature permanents, huge upside here. As far as combos, obviously blinking Dockside, kind of busted. Blinking Archaeomancer to get back Mana Geyser, to cast it again to blink Archaeomancer. Oh my god, you're going to make so much mana. Easily goes infinite with Palinchron, especially with a buyback spell. If you want to do this in the fair way, you just cast like Whispers of the Muse with buyback for 6 mana, blink your Palinchron, untap 7 lands, so you're making 7 mana essentially, at least, and then you can Whisper the Muse again and again. You make infinite mana, you draw your entire deck. If you want to do this the mean way, you just capsize all your opponent's permanents. 6 mana for capsize with buyback, bounce an opponent's land, blink your Palinchron, you have your capsize again, you cast it with the lands you untap, bounce literally all your opponent's permanents, get the triple flawless victory. Your playgroup is gonna hate you, but it does sound hilarious. There's some loops with Eternal Witness too. If you have like a couple of free sack artifacts like Mishra's Bauble and Urza's Bauble, you can like Eternal Witness, then Mishra's Bauble to get something back by blinking Eternal Witness, and then you can crack your Mishra's Bauble, so you draw a card on the next upkeep, and then you can Urza's Bauble to blink your Eternal Witness to get back the Mishra's Bauble. Then you sack the Urza's Bauble, then you do it again and again and again. I don't think it works with just one Mishra's Bauble though. I've seen a couple people mention that. They wanted to try to combo that way. I don't think it works because of the timing. Displacer Kitten triggers when you cast it. So let's you have Eternal Witness and you cast a Mishra's Bauble. You're going to have the Bauble on the stack. It's going to trigger Displacer Kitten to blink the Eternal Witness, but the Eternal Witness is going to blink while the Bauble is still on the stack. So you do need those 2 cards to keep the loop going. So at least there's a little extra step to go infinite with the Bauble plan. I think also Garth One-Eyed, probably going to see play there, easily goes infinite with haste. You tap Garth to make a Black Lotus, and then you can cast a Black Lotus to blink Garth with Displacer Kit, and then you tap it to make a Black Lotus again and again and again. I know that Garth says choose a card that hasn't been chosen, but if you blink it, you basically reset that and have a new Garth, so you can choose the same option again. So then you make infinite mana with your Black Lotuses, then you tutor up a Brain Geyser with Garth, and you Brain Geyser to draw your entire deck and win somehow, or make infinite Shivan Dragons, whatever, however you want to do it. It is going to go infinite and win you the game. So this card, the problem I have with this is I think it might actually be too good. The best comparison might be Deadeye Navigator. Displacer Kitten, smaller, but it's cheaper. You do need spells in hand, but it works with not just a single creature you're soul bonded with, but with any non-land permanent, which is a huge upside, and it can protect itself. You cast a spell to blink it like we talked about before. Deadeye Navigator is a card I used to play in every Panharmonicon deck, in every blink deck, but then I realized it's actually not a very fun card because it's too powerful. It's too easy to have this in a Peregrine Drake and just go infinite and win the game. It's just really simple to combo with, and it ends the game in a very anticlimactic way. So I found myself cutting Deadeye Navigator from essentially all my decks, and I'm a little worried that Displacer Kitten is going to be on that level. I'm definitely going to try it because maybe it won't be, and it is a really powerful effect, but it might be one of those cards that's actually so strong that you find yourself cutting it because it ends up not being fun in practice. So Displacer Kitten, card's busted. One of the most powerful cards from the set. If you're a blink deck, if you're a spellslinger deck, if you want to combo off, this card is going to get the job done. Just be warned, it might actually be a little bit too good. We also got maybe the best mass reanimation spell in white of all time, Ascent from Avernus. Treble white and X, sorcery, return all creatures and planeswalkers with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then exile Ascent from Avernus. So yes, this card is a lot of mana to get going. If you want to reanimate your whole graveyard, you're going to need 8, 9, 10 mana, maybe even more than that. So it is expensive, but it is incredibly powerful. When you think about white reanimation often has timing restrictions, like Rally the Ancestors can reanimate everything, but only for a turn. Face Reward can reanimate a bunch of stuff, but it's got to be stuff that went to the graveyard this turn. It's pretty good at reanimating one thing with like Karmic Guide effects, or a bunch of artifacts or enchantments, or even planeswalkers, but it doesn't really have mass creature reanimation. That doesn't come with a really big restriction. Well, now it does in Ascent from Avernus. I think maybe the best comparisons, and these aren't even good comparisons, Martial Anthem, if you have a ridiculous amount of mana, can reanimate reanimate your entire graveyard. Can't get planeswalkers, but still you can get back all your creatures, but you're gonna have to cast it for, I don't even know, 20, 30 mana. Ascent for Avernus is expensive, but it's not that expensive. Another like pseudo mass reanimation spell, Storm of Souls. The problem is all your stuff's gonna be 1/1s, which is not that exciting. If you compare this to some black spells though, you can see just how strong it is. Like Finale of Eternity, if you cast it for 12 or more mana, reanimates all the creatures in your graveyard. If you cast Ascent from Avernus for 12 or more mana, you should reanimate all the creatures and planeswalkers in your graveyard as well, or even Rise of the Dark Realms. 9 mana, reanimate everything. Of course, it gets your opponent's creatures, which Ascent from Avernus isn't going to do. But if you cast Ascent from Avernus in the typical white deck for 9 mana, you're probably putting your entire graveyard of creatures and planeswalkers into play. So even compared to black reanimation, this isn't that inefficient considering all that it does. So this is a card that is an absurd source of card advantage for white. A lot of times we get too stuck on the words draw a card. Like Esper Sentinel Mangara, they say draw a card, and they're fine cards, but we've talked a lot about white needing better card draw. Ascent for Avernus, even though it isn't technically card draw, is a great source of card advantage. If you're using one card to put 3 or 4 or 20 creatures into play, you are generating card advantage. So I really like this as a source of card advantage for white decks. I could see just jamming this in any mono white deck as a recursion spell. Obviously, the cheaper your deck is, the easier it's going to be to send everything back into play. If your deck is all, Eldrazi or something, really expensive cards, you might run into trouble, but I can see Gaida playing it, Edaline Knights or whatever playing it, Humans, I could see Darien playing it. It seems pretty easy to make this card good enough in your typical white deck. Also a great option for non-black reanimator decks. One of my favorite new archetypes is like Azorius Reanimator with Shikori or Niambi. Black is really good at reanimating, but sometimes it's more fun to take the hard mode and do this with a color that isn't best at it. And I think that Ascend for Avernus is a huge deal for these Azorius Reanimator decks. Also might be good enough in like Esper Reanimator decks. Like, it's a really powerful card. I could see Rafine playing it or Verena playing it. Yeah, you get the black reanimation, which is definitely more efficient at reanimating one thing, but Ascent from Avernus, if you don't want to living end all of your opponent's stuff into play or living death all of your opponent's stuff into play, it's actually not that inefficient for mass reanimation. The other place this card's going to be really exciting is an aristocrat style decks. We've seen Rally the Ancestors kind of combo in aristocrat style decks where you sack your entire board to get a bunch of death triggers, do whatever shenanigans you're doing, and then you just reanimate all your stuff and do it again and win the game with Blood Artist triggers or whatever. Ascent for Avernus is going to be great there. So Tisa Karlov, Bane, X's, I think it's in the conversation there as well. So Ascent for Avernus, I love this card, and I love white getting more non-card draw card advantage. Even if white, it's improved so much at drawing cards that it's not even really important anymore, but even if white doesn't get more cards that say draw a card, if it gets more Ascent from Avernuses in recursion, in virtual card advantage, I think that that's fine, and that's a great way to fix some of its problems. Although again, I think that white's moved up to like maybe the second most powerful color in all of Commander now, so I don't even know we need to fix white anymore, but if we do, Ascent for Avernus is still heading in that direction. We also got a wacky removal spell in Call of the Void. 5-mana sorcery. Each player secretly chooses a creature they control and a creature they don't control. Then you reveal the creatures and all those creatures get destroyed. So essentially when you cast this, you know that every player is going to lose at least one creature, and it's possible that up to 4 other creatures will be destroyed. So if the voting goes, well, pseudo voting, it's not technically a voting card, which does matter for some commanders, but if the choices go in the optimal way, it could destroy up to 8 creatures for 5 mana, which isn't a bad deal. So I think if you're trying to play the best removal, this isn't going to be in your deck. Toxic Deluge is just going to sweep the board. Deadly Rollick is just going to kill whatever you want, maybe for free. Call the Void is not on that power level, although there are upsides. One of the big upsides is it doesn't actually target. You're just naming a creature, essentially. So if there's a creature with a Swiftfoot boots on it that's really got to go, or there's a Shalai out giving all your opponent's stuff hexproof, or maybe an Invisible Stalker that's loaded up with equipment about to one-shot you, Call the Void is going to guarantee you get rid of that thing, even if it's hexproof, even if it's Shroud. It just doesn't care. The most hilarious part of this card, though, is definitely the game theory that goes into it. So let's say you got one really good creature on your side of the battlefield and some lesser creatures, like a Sheoldred. So you cast this card, and you're going to think, okay, my opponent's probably going to name Shieldred. They're going to want to get that off the battlefield. Should I name my own Shieldred? That's a legitimate option. Like, if you name your best creature, assuming that one of your opponents is going to name it anyway, that's a way that you can make sure, or try to make sure, that you only lose one creature to Call the Void. You could name your worst creature, but then if your opponent names your Shieldred, then you're losing two things rather than just one thing. On the other hand, what if you name Shieldred and none of your opponents named it, and then you blew up your best thing for no reason? It would have survived anyway. So you kind of get into that Princess Bride wine choice making game theory thing.
Now, a clever man would put the poison into his own goblet because he would know that only a great fool would reach for what he was given. I'm not a great fool, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of you. But you must have known I was not a great fool. You would have counted on it, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of me.
You've made your decision then?
Not remotely.
And I think that's the role of this card. It's not going to be the best removal spell, but if you like political shenanigans and you're playing like Shadrach Silverquill or maybe Tivit, I know not technically a voting card, but it works with the political theme of Tivit, I think this could just be a very fun option. So a card that I don't think is very strong power level wise, but that's fine because it's really fun. And it's just, I love cards like this in Commander. Everyone's going to be talking, everyone's going to be making choices, a great social political card, even though it's not going to be out a Toxic Deluge or whatever on power level. We also got another baby monster in Owlbear Cub, 3 mana 3/3 bird bear, and it has an ability, Mother is Near, that says whenever it attacks a player that controls 8 or more lands, look at the top 8 cards of your library, and you may put a creature card from among those cards on the battlefield tapped and attacking. The rest go to the bottom of your library. So Owlbear Cub, there are a lot of hoops to jump to. It's only a 3 mana 3/3. It's got to attack. It doesn't have haste, and it's got to attack someone that has 8 lands. So the ability might not be turned on into the late game, but when it works, it's a lot of value for free. Definitely better than its parent Owlbear. Was a pretty forgettable card in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. Its trigger is actually kind of sort of like a Winota trigger. Of course, you got to jump through the hoops to make it happen, but if it does happen, you're kind of Winoting, even going a little bit deeper in your deck, and you don't have any restriction based on creature types. So I think this card is kind of designed to punish the green player, and I want to see more of these cards. Green ramp is the best thing in Commander. It is the most powerful mechanic ability in the format. It's the easiest way to get ahead at the table, just cultivating, Kedama reaching, a rampant growth thing. And I think that it's really easy to just go off with green and get way ahead of the table. Well, Owlbear is great at punishing the green player. Its ability in a lot of games won't turn on until the late game, but if you have someone that's aggressively land ramping, like a green player, this is going to come on a little earlier, and you're going to want to attack the green player with the lands, because you need the player to have 8 lands for it to trigger. If it's not triggering, it's a pretty bad card. So I like that it punishes the green player. I think I'd consider this, especially in decks that can give it haste, like Xenagos, probably the perfect home, can give it haste, and it often plays a lot of big creatures. Halan and Elena Partners, another good option to haste in your Owlbear, smash the green player, get something for free. In Censure, in green, you got ways to kind of control what you hit with Owlbear. Like, once it turns on, for 1 mana, you can like Worldly Tutor, Sylvan Tutor, the perfect creature to your top of your deck, smash the green player, smash the player with 8 lands, get in a ton of damage, whatever you're trying to do. Brutalizer Exarch can also get it done. So Owlbear Cub, I like this card. I think there's so many hoops to jump through, and its ability takes so long to turn on that I think its power level is really going to be dependent on your playgroup in the deck you're playing. If you can haste this in, and you got green players in your playgroup that are getting to 8 lands relatively early in the game, then I think Owlbear Cub's really good. On the other hand, if no one's land ramping, it seems a little bit slow, and doubly so if you can't haste it, and you got to play it as a 3/3 and wait around the table a turn cycle to try to attack someone with it, and that's probably going to get killed before you get a chance. So little hit or miss in terms of playgroups and decks, but in the right scenario, it's a lot of power for 3 mana. We also got Font of Magic, a 4 mana enchantment that says instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each time you've cast a commander from the command zone this game. So Font of Magic compares to Primal Amulet, Jace's Sanctum, Arcane Melee. We got a bunch of these artifacts or enchantments that make your instants or sorceries cheaper. So Font of Magic by itself doesn't really do anything, and whether you're going to want Font of Magic over some of these other options is really going to depend on your deck. If you're playing a deck with a relatively expensive commander like a Melik or a Niv Mizzet, this is probably just going to be worse than a Jace's Sanctum or a Primal Amulet or an Arcane Melee. On the other hand, if you're playing a cheaper commander that you might actually cast a couple of times, then it is in the conversation. Where this is really going to shine, though, is in partner style decks. When you have two commanders, it's twice as easy to cast them. You can cast them twice as often. And when you're casting your commander 3 times, 4 times, then this card becomes pretty exciting because it can make really expensive spells really, really cheap. So like Karakin Shakashima, that's probably the premier spellslinger partner style deck. This seems great there as a ramp spell / cost reduction effect. And it also works with our new background stuff. Backgrounds technically are commanders, even though they're enchantments. So maybe there's some sort of like Gale with a cheap background or Levon with a cheap background pile that can do the same kind of trick. If not in full-on commander, then at least in Commander Legends Limited. So Fauna Magic, it's a fine card. It's a fine ramp spell. I think if you're a spellslinger deck, especially one with a cheap commander or a partner pairing or a background partner pairing, then this can be in the conversation and potentially even really good as a ramp spell in those partner decks. We also got Elturel Survivors, which kind of meh. 4 mana, 0/4, trample Myriad. So when it attacks, you're going to get one for each other opponent. And as long as it's attacking, it gets +X/+0, where X is the number of lands defending player controls. So this is a card that can potentially get pretty big, but really that's all it does. I like that it kind of punishes the green player who ramps a lot. On the other hand, it doesn't really work with much of anything. It's like a Coastline Marauders that has Myriad, except it doesn't actually work with Ishin or Wolfgar. The way it's worded, it's not an attack trigger, it just gets big when it attacks, so you don't actually get to double up its power with an Ishin or Wolfgar, which is a little disappointing. I guess you get to double up the Myriad at least, but I think this is one of the bulkiest rares from the set, and especially considering its creature types aren't really relevant for any tribal decks, I don't think this is gonna see play anywhere. We also got 9 Fingers Keene, a interesting new Sultai-Human Rogue legend, a 4 mana 4/4 with Menace and Ward of Pay 9 life, which 9 life is actually, that's a lot. That's actually a pretty good form of protection. And it says, when it deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 9 cards of your library. You may put a gate card from among them onto the battlefield. Then if you control 9 or more gates, put the rest in your hand. Otherwise, put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. I love gates. I want to be hyped about this card. It is so close to being my favorite commander from the set, but we got one big problem. Gates really wants to be 5 colors. We've been looking for a new great gate commander ever since Golos got banned. Golos definitely overpowered, but it was kind of the perfect gate commander. 9 Fingers Keene, if this was 5 colors, it would be it. This card would be awesome. It would be amazing. It would be great. I would love it. The problem with it only being 3 colors is we just don't got enough gates. Before Commander Legends 2, there are exactly 4 gates. 4 that you could even play in a 9 Fingers deck. Dimir, Golgari, and Simic Guildgate along with Gateway Plaza. We have 2 more. We know we're getting some more random common gates in the set itself, but it seems like you're gonna have to play literally every gate possible, no matter how good or bad it might be. And even if you do that, the ability is gonna be pretty whiffy because you're only gonna get up to like 9 or 10 gates in the entire deck. So I feel like that's the problem with this card. If this was a 5 color commander, it would be maybe my favorite legend from the set. I'm super hyped for all the gate supports. I love gate decks. I always have fun playing gate decks, and I'm glad to see gates getting better, but being 3 colors just kind of kills this for me. So if you want to build gates, as much as I hate to say it, I think Child of Alara is still just the best option now that Golos is gone. It doesn't specifically work with lands, other than it only blows up non-lands, so you can use it to repeatedly blow up the board while your maze is ending and getting your gate stuff set up. Otherwise, you can play any random 5 color commander, I guess, but I'm still keeping my fingers crossed that we get another gate commander. 9 Fingers is interesting. I love the design. It protects itself well. Its combat damage trigger is insane and doubly insane. Like if you're drawing 9, it's absurd. The only problem is you don't get enough gates in 3 colors. So we'll see. I'm still going to try it. Maybe it'll still be pretty fun, but I would be so hyped for this card if it was a 5 color legend rather than a Sultai legend. We also got a pretty spicy new mythic equipment in Pact Weapon. So 4 mana black equipment. It says as long as it's attached to a creature, you don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. Whenever a equipped creature attacks, you draw a card and reveal it, and the creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, and you lose X life, where X is the card's mana value, and you can equip it by discarding a card. So this card, obviously, the big thing that stands out is you get it on a creature and you kind of get your pseudo platinum angel. You can still lose the game to things other than having 0 or less life. So keep that in mind. You get milled out or whatever. However, you're not going to lose the game by going to negative life totals. Of course, that does require keeping equipment not only on the battlefield, but attached to a creature. So if Pact Weapon dies or the creature dies and you're at negative life totals, you're going to die too. But it is a nice way that you can keep attacking with this card, even if you're low on life and you're worried about taking a bunch of damage from your own equipment. So if you think about this, it's like a weird Lich style card mixed with a Ophidian version of Dark Confidant with the card draw. Like every turn you attack, you're drawing a card, you're losing some life, but you're not going to die. And then you get the maybe upside of that discard a card equip cost. So how do you actually play with this card? One option is give your creature lifelink. If you have lifelink, you can kind of get around the loss of life and be able to keep taking damage from it again and again. Maybe locks it on Warhammer or an equipment deck, or just straight up lifelink. There's a bunch of cards that can do it. Also works well with lifelink commanders. Going to have that naturally, sticking on a Lisa or something. Also might work in some casual Eureka decks. It cares about the cost of the card on the top of your deck, which is the same thing that Eureka cares about. So you stick something big on the top of your deck, and then you're going to attack and reveal it and draw it and do all those shenanigans, which is kind of fun. Also, kind of a combo piece. One of the ways that you can take advantage of this is play it with cards that cause you to lose life, like Ad Nauseam. If you have a Pact Weapon on a creature and you cast Ad Nauseam, you can draw your entire deck. You'll probably go negative 100 life or something, 200 life, whatever huge number, but that's fine. You're not going to die because of that, so you can just keep drawing. We see modern decks do this with Ad Nauseam and Phyrexian Unlife. You can do the same thing with Pact Weapon. On the other hand, it is worth mentioning that you can't pay life you don't have. So let's say you get down below 0 life, you can't activate Unspeakable Symbol, or you can't crack a Polluted Delta. I saw some people talking about this card like, oh, this would be sweet with Unspeakable Symbol, just make infinitely big creatures. You can lose life that you don't have access to. That's why the Ad Nauseam combo works, but you can't pay life that you don't have access to. So as far as actual homes for this card, one obvious one is just to play it with attacking commanders, equipment commanders. Like Graven seems like a perfect home. Graven cares about the amount of life that you lost, so you're going to make your Graven doubly big with Pact Weapon, or equipment decks like Sir Gwyn, attacking decks like Ishin, double up the attack trigger. Plus, you get this protection, and I don't think it's hard protection, because as we talked about before, it's an equipment, it's got to be on a creature. The creature dying or the equipment dying is going to break the lock, essentially, of Pact Weapon, but it could buy you a couple of turns. The other reason this card really intrigues me is the equip discard a card. This is a free, repeatable, although sorcery speed discard outlet, which might mean it has some homes in like Reanimator decks if you're trying to get a big thing in the graveyard so you can reanimate it in Old Stick Fingers or Sephiroth. This is a way you can just discard whatever you want to, or maybe Madness decks. You can keep activating Pact Weapon. That's an important thing to point out here, moving it back and forth between creatures to keep discarding cards. So if you need a discard outlet in a Madness deck like Ange or maybe Asmore, Pact Weapon can do that as well with a bunch of extra upside. So Pact Weapon, this card keeps growing on me. Every time I read it, I find some other use for it. It might look a little janky. It might look like an against odds card. And it is a 4-mana equipment, so I don't think this is like a CDH card. Like the Ad Nauseam combo, probably not coming to a CDH table near you. But in like mid-power tables, this seems really fun and actually has a surprising number of homes. As far as lower rarity cards, Campfire, not going to make it in most decks, I don't think, but does seem good in Phage. Is another way to get your Phage into your hand so you can actually play it. So keep it in mind there if you're a Phage player. We got some lower rarity Adventure Dragons, probably going to be good in limited, probably going to be tough to make the cut in full-on commander decks. There's just so many dragons these days, and a bunch of draft chaff that will be important for limited, but not super exciting otherwise. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our daily Commander Legends Battle for Baldur Gate spoilers for today. So let me know what you think of all these sweet new cards. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll be back tomorrow with more Commander Legends 2 spoilers. So until then, have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.